whenever I tried to talk to my friends about it, it would be really tough because no one really wants to talk about money and it's so personal. And I would try to educate my friends about it. I even told my friend, I'm like, okay, make sure you ask the financial rep at the bank about fees. And she's like, okay, well, I asked him all the questions. He said that there's no fees. And I'm like, no, but there are fees. And she's like, and we got into this argument. And it's really disheartening when people earnestly believe that they're not being charged fees and the banks just don't make it all that transparent.
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Sandy Yong wants everyone to learn about personal finance so that their future self can thank them for it. Sandy figured out early on that if you give your money to the big banks and don't know what you want to invest in, they will choose the ones with the highest fees. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you went to a car dealership and said, here's some money, I want a car, and didn't give them any parameters like fuel efficiency or speed or size or whatever, they would sell you the car that makes them the most money. In fact, if they didn't do that, I would question if they're in the right business. Sandy figured out that if she learned the basics of personal finance, she could invest her own money, have more control over her risk, and save a ton on fees. She learned so much about personal finance that when the opportunity came up to publish a book, personal finance was the clear subject. Sandy's book, The Money Master, will be published in the summer of 2019. It's always great to have another voice in the personal finance community to help increase financial literacy and democratize personal finance. Financial wellness is nearly impossible to achieve if you're having mental health issues. Recognizing this, Sandy has decided to donate $2 from every sale of her book to CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. If you've heard my story of addiction and recovery, you know that this has a special meaning for me. So thank you, Sandy, for making this commitment. Sandy joined me in the studio in Hamilton to tell her personal finance story.
My earliest childhood memory with money is when I would go to the local corner store. I think it was called Becker's.
Sure, yeah, Becker's, yeah.
And
they still have those, I think.
Probably.
Or maybe not. Maybe they all switched over to like Circle K or Max Milk or something like that. But yeah, so you had early Becker's?
Yes, and I may have been maybe 4 years old at the time.
Oh, you remember 4. Wow, okay. So 4 years old.
And I would walk down the street with my father, and we would go into the store, and he would give me some change, and I would be able to pick out my own candy bar.
And you remember that you needed the money to get the candy bar, and like, how much money do you know?
Maybe $1.
Just $1, and you go, and you're like.
He would hand me the money, and we would go up to the cashier, and I would physically hand the money to the cashier, and so that's where I was able to kind of formulate the fact that you need to have currency in order to buy the things you want.
That's excellent. That's an excellent lesson. I think that's one of the earliest things that we should start with our kids, like, because you can't really teach them money so early, like, concepts and stuff, but you can let them go and pay for something. So I think that was pretty bright of your dad to do that. I don't know if he was trying to teach you, do you know, or he was just trying to let you have the experience?
I think he was just trying to teach me. Yeah, just simple.
Well, how was he with money? Do you have any memory of how your parents were with money?
There were good and bad things growing up and learning about money. My dad was very good at bookkeeping.
Okay. And
so he would do the old school method where he would keep track on a yearly basis all of our household expenses.
Nice.
And,
on paper?
On paper, manually.
Wow.
Yeah. Growing up in a family of 4, my dad was the sole provider for our family.
Okay.
And my mother was a stay-at-home mom, mostly in part because she was living with mental health illnesses.
Okay.
And so my father worked as a chef in various Chinese seafood restaurants.
Wow. So that's busy work. And do you want to talk about your mother's mental health illnesses at all, or do you want to move on from that?
Maybe we can cover it a little bit later.
Okay, we'll talk about that
Yeah.
later. Okay,
Yeah.
So because I'm really big on mental health advocacy, and I know you are as well. So would you see your dad ever? Like he was working as a chef?
I remember, being young, like I was a daddy's girl, so I was
Okay.
very attached to
Yeah.
him. And I believe at times he would juggle between two full-time jobs, right?
Wow.
Working
Wow.
day at a restaurant and then having night shifts as well. And I didn't want him to leave the house. I'd be like, no, like stay
Yeah.
home, like play with me. And I would cry and he'd be like, no, I have to go and work. And, and as a 4-year-old child, you don't really understand what's happening.
No, not yet.
But growing up, I could see that he was able to put food on the table and make sure that everything was covered in the household.
It's a lot of sacrifice, right? Because you're the provider, and to work 2 jobs and to not, you make the choice. You can't see your kids as much, right? And especially when they don't understand when you're so young. Oh, it's got to be heartbreaking for him to go to work every day at that point. And so this experience where you went to the store together, like whenever he had a day off, I guess.
Yes, during his time
few
off.
and far between, I guess,
Yeah.
right? So you learned, from him indirectly and probably later on, that you have to work hard for money. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere, right? Do you remember when you first started earning money yourself? Did you have an early job?
Okay, so the legal age to start working, at least in Ontario, I believe is 16 years
Sure.
old. But my parents got me started when I was 14. Of
Yeah.
course, back then it would just be cash jobs.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't really last very long. It was just a couple of months here and there.
But what would you do?
So my first one was working in a gift basket store.
Okay.
And they taught me how to put together gift baskets, and this was leading up to the Christmas season.
Yeah.
So I did that for a little bit.
Wait, how are you getting into the gift basket market? Like who's the connection?
Through family connections.
So
they knew like
they have
the store
somebody who works there,
owners.
the owner, and they're like, okay, you give my daughter some work. She can work
Yes.
hard.
Yeah.
She'll make the baskets. Okay, so you're bringing in some cash.
Yeah.
And what are you doing with that cash?
Well, I think as like a teenager, most likely it's either clothing, entertainment. Back then they had CDs, so I would buy CDs from Columbia House. I think they had those mail
wow,
order
seriously.
subscriptions.
That you had to buy them. Otherwise, you would have to pay money. I forget the deal there, right? You get free ones, and then you have this obligation
Yeah,
to buy the rest of them.
4, get
Right.
one free,
Yeah.
something like that.
So it wasn't like you were working. Your dad was able to take care of the family by working the double job sometimes, and you didn't. Like they didn't put any burden on you to be like, you need to contribute. This was just for you.
As a teenager,
Yeah.
not so much. Like all the money that I did earn throughout high school and university
Yeah.
was for my own spending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was there any talk of saving for the future, for going to school or anything like that?
For university, I did have to pay my way
Yeah.
through university. But I think at 18, we went to the bank together and we set up the RSP. Although back then, we didn't know anything else except for mutual funds.
Yeah, okay.
But at least-
So they set it up when you were done high school then, or about to go to university. Okay, so
Mhm.
they wanted you to, this was kind of like, you're a grown up now?
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So for school then, there was no real saving for school. So you knew you were going to have to take loans out or...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was just the plan. Maybe OSAP government loans?
I
Yeah.
had OSAP.
So
yes.
that's what you end up doing. So was it fully OSAP loans, or did you have bank loans as well?
Fully OSAP loans. I
Okay.
didn't have any bank loans, but what I did was that in school, in university, I did have several part-time jobs.
Okay.
And because I was so dedicated towards my education, I was top of my class, and I applied for the student scholarships that were available in my program. Because a lot of students, they may not necessarily take advantage of that, or they don't even take this first step to apply. But I did apply, and I was able to win scholarships each year.
So I like when this comes up because there's so many scholarships out there. And were these just internal within your school?
Most of them were internal within my department, my
Yeah,
program.
within your program.
But then even through OSAP, I think there was the Queen Elizabeth scholarship. If you meet a certain GPA, they will also provide you with some funding.
And this is while you're in school, but did you think about it before you went to school? Entrance scholarships or anything like that? Did that come to mind?
I think it was only the Queen Elizabeth one. I think that's just funded by the government.
Yeah.
I had that.
So, yeah, if you would have known about all the other ones available, I mean, that might have helped you. But when you were in it, what do you think triggered you to apply for these scholarships?
I needed the money.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I mean, OSAP, they lend you the money, but it's not free.
No.
Essentially, you still have to pay it off. So it would either be through working part-time or through winning scholarships.
Okay.
So I figured, hey, why not do both? And
you know, it could have been something as simple as you get an email that says, hey, there's scholarships, or somebody mentions it to you, or you listen to a podcast like this and somebody's talking about scholarships. And that's why I like when we talk about it, because there are private scholarships out there for high school students. There are scholarships for when you're in a certain program, when you're of a certain demographic, a certain cultural background even, right?
That's
and
right.
you may find that you are the only person of that background in your program, and it's almost like free money from some people that I've said who applied, like I was the only person who could qualify for this, or there are very few people, you know, of my background who applied, and I got it. So just like, I just want everyone to remember that, you know, and spread the word. Scholarships. So you got some. You got a couple, and that helped.
Yes, it definitely helped to lessen the burden.
Sure.
I mean, going through university, there's just so much to deal with exams and group projects. It's a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah.
So to have that financial aid definitely helped lessen the burden.
Okay, so what did you study? What degree did you get?
I went to Ryerson University through the Ted Rogers School of Management program,
Cool.
and I studied hospitality and tourism management.
What was your goal in that?
My goal was to graduate and enter into the event planning industry.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, because I worked in the events business for a while, in live entertainment for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment.
I work for MLSC as well.
Do you work for them now?
No, not anymore.
No, when did you work for MLSC?
During university, one of my part-time jobs was working at the BMO Field where TFC plays, and also at the Ricoh Coliseum where the Toronto Marlies play.
Amazing, yeah. So I was there from 2005 to 2011.
Oh, okay.
In the live entertainment department, so anything to do with concerts. But mostly I was backstage at the ACC settling concerts.
Oh, cool.
There, and that's my experience. I know that events is a tough business. And it takes there's a lot of people are pulling you in different directions all the time. Were you looking to put together events for people, like event planning in that respect?
So right after I graduated, and this was during the economic recession of 08 and 09, I was fortunate enough to land my first real job working as an event manager, planning national conferences within the hotel and tourism industry. So very much corporate conferences for the CEOs and other high-level executives. It would be the conference for the whole entire hotel and tourism industry. Oh, wow.
Yeah, okay.
And, an annual conference. We had 6 different ones, like one for restaurants, one for tourism, a few for hotels, and we would have them in major cities across Canada.
Well, that's a lot of work. And what was your role specifically in the group to put these conferences together?
Well, just like you said, I had to wear multiple hats.
So you were doing all the hats. Okay.
I had to handle the registration, look for volunteers through our post-secondary educations and train them for the day of the conferences. I also handled with the marketing, with our email campaigns and even flyers and ads, to booking our hotel rooms, and then the whole conference agenda, updating our websites, everything.
So you got really good at logistics and basically pulling an event together.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a lot of work, and it can be stressful at times, especially as the event draws near or during the event.
That's when I started pulling in 70, 80 hours easily. And it was just, you kind of have to dedicate your life during those times.
You need to be in your 20s, basically, to do this, right? Early 20s, I'm guessing this was the case. So yeah, and I cut you off earlier when you were talking about your early cash jobs. What was another one you were just about to mention? I think.
Okay, these didn't last very long, of course, because not sure how legitimate they are when you're under 16. But there was one where we went door to door sales, and we would like literally go in the back of someone's van. They would drive us into a rich neighborhood.
I don't know where this is going.
Release us, and they're like, okay, well, now you have to sell saran wrap and aluminum foil and garbage bags. So.
Really? Door to door? Did you say door to door?
Door to door sales.
Like,
it was really sad. So that lasted a few shifts, and I barely made any money. And then the other odd one was, you know those, okay, not the ice cream trucks, but the ice cream carts?
Yeah.
And then you've got these people riding on the bicycle.
On the bikes, yeah.
So my friend and I, we would go on this bicycle into this random park. Because, of course, like, it's also seniority, right? If you've been around for a while, they'll give you the most
the good
popular
route. Yeah, exactly.
parks, but we were given one with barely any traffic, and again we barely sold any popsicles or ice cream that day.
So I did that for one day as well. But it was the worst day of my life, not because it's funny, you think it'd be because of this, but not because like kids stole my ice cream, but because I had the worst sunburn of my life.
Oh no.
You're on the bike. It's May. It's like cloudy outside, so you don't think that the sun is shining on you. You know, a dumb 20-something. Never had a sunburn that bad in my life before. So the tops of my hands just, at the end of the day, swollen.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was so painful and blisters. And the doctor said I got like years of sun in like a day.
Wow.
Like a regular, what somebody might get like every day with little exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I never did that again. And I guess you didn't do much because you weren't selling much.
Barely made a few bucks. They kind of just gave us some money for pity.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. That's nice. And you didn't get a bad sunburn, so you should feel lucky about that one. But the reason I went back is because I feel like these early jobs, they help prepare you for like this event organization job, right? Because it gives you exposure to all these different things, right? And I think we need those early jobs, even though they're not paying us a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what it does. It gives us perspective, and they prepare you for taking, I don't know, everybody coming at you, or maybe developing a work ethic, like you said, 70, 80 hours.
Yeah.
That's tough, though. So what kind of money are you getting paid for this, though?
Well, now it's like close to what minimum wage is today. So it was on the low end of the industry.
Sure.
And I mean, even hospitality and tourism in general, it's probably on the lower end of pay scales. So
that's unfortunate.
For me, I was bright and I was hungry and I was driven. I was like, okay, just got to get my foot in the door and get this experience.
Yeah.
And I was there for 3 years.
Okay. Wow.
There were ups and downs, of course. I mean, just high stress, and it felt like a 24/7 job. But I mean, I definitely learned a lot, and my boss pushed me hard, and there were some growing pains. But now that I look back on it, I'm really grateful because I feel like I can be more competitive than other people in the field and excel. So
yeah, you have that experience. So what are your personal finances looking like at this time? So you have your OSAP debt, some of it which you're able to pay off or hedge with scholarships, and maybe you didn't have to take the full load on, but now you're coming out. Did you get that job right away, like out of school?
Yeah, we pretty much. So you finish school in April, convocated in June, and then in the summer I was able to work as a research assistant in my school's program.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that for the summer, and then right in September, I remember in September I went to my full-time job, and then nostalgically thinking about how a year ago I was going to class.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you didn't have like a big gap or any gap, I guess, if you got that summer job where you had to worry about how am I going to pay. Are you living in Toronto by yourself at this point?
At this point, I was living at home with my family.
So you're living at home, so you don't have to worry about rent and stuff, which is nice. Or were you having to pay rent?
I was fortunate enough I did not have to pay rent.
So that's great. And again, public service announcement, if you cannot pay rent, do that. It's the biggest cost. And there are times in our lives when we have to pay. We're going to have to pay tons of rent. I'm doing it now. And if you have this opportunity, because what it does is it gives kids you get a head start where you're not having to worry about, I got to take this crappy job so that I can pay my rent. But you did have loans and they were coming due, so it's good that you got this. So were you able to start making a dent in your student?
I paid it off as quickly as possible because being the frugal self that I have been, I did not want to pay any interest on those loans.
Of course,
so I made it my number one goal to pay it off. I think I paid it off before the interest kicked in. So.
Really? So within what, a year?
I think by September. I think they started charging. I think 4 months, 6 months afterwards.
Really?
Once you graduate. So I just paid it off, and plus the scholarships helped to pay down a lot of it.
Okay, so you're basically having no debt. So, and your frugality, did you get that from your parents, or what do you think? It's just a natural thing?
Probably a combination of my own personal habits and then seeing how my family handled money. Of course, I would say we barely lived above the poverty line.
Okay.
Very conservative. We never went on any family trips, unfortunately. But my dad, just made just enough to support our family. But then I believe when I was about 10 years old, my father actually suffered from, I believe, a heart attack. And then he was in the hospital for 2 months.
Wow.
Had to go through a triple bypass surgery. And then from then on, he had to go on to ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program.
Okay.
So even then, when in his maybe mid-50s, he had to stop working. So really, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, so we didn't really have too much to go on. So I kind of also had to work in high school just to be able to support myself too.
Yeah. That's crazy. Okay, so you're coming from that, and if, I'm glad OSAP existed, so you could go to school. And then you get this job, and you're paying off your student loans right away. That's amazing. So what about credit cards? Did they ever get to you? Did the evil corporations find you?
Fortunately, they did not, but I did have a credit card in university.
Sure.
I was very responsible with it. I think even back then in university, working part-time, I believe I kept it as a $500 limit. So I would never go over that. I made sure, my dad told me, make sure you pay it off your monthly bills, and I was good in that way.
So just for convenience. Okay, so you're paying off your debt. You don't have any troubles with consumer debt, and you don't have any time to spend money. So are you saving money while you're doing this 3 years of the conference work?
I did. I think I was really smart in the fact that I sat myself down and I took an Excel spreadsheet.
Excellent.
I didn't know at the time that anyone else was doing it, but I mapped out okay, well, from now on for the next 45 years of my life, this is
You did that right then?
Yeah, I kind of figured out. Of course, only within a 5-year time frame that'll be the most accurate. After that, it's hard to predict. But it's okay, well, what do I want to achieve? I'm I want to get married. I want to buy a house. I want to have a car.
Okay.
And then, of course, save for retirement and my future kids' RESP. So I was okay, how much do I need? How much do I need to save up? And what's my time frame? And this is how much I need to save. And then based on opening up my RSP and my TFSA, I was okay, well, this is how much I need to save every paycheck. So I was very diligent, probably within my first year of starting my first full-time job.
Who taught you all this stuff? How did you learn?
So a really good classmate and friend of mine, he recommended me to read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Not the first guest to mention Rich Dad Poor Dad. It is ubiquitous in this building wealth concept, right? Please continue, yeah.
And so I was okay, sure. And I picked it up, probably from the library, and read it. And I was so fascinated by it. And after that, I was just immediately hooked. I felt like I was just entering into this new realm of personal finance and investing. So from there, I just decided to learn more about it, because in school, even though I have a business degree, they don't teach you about personal finance.
They don't. Can you give your just a quick takeaway from Rich Dad Poor Dad? What was the message that you got from that book?
I believe, other than the ESBI quadrant, right?
Okay, can you go into that?
Okay, so the ESBI quadrant, basically, Robert Kiyosaki explains it that you can either be of you can be an employee or you can be self-employed. And the other options are being a business owner and an investor. And then, and then essentially as an employee, you're trading in time for money, which is linear income or active income. So say if you're working 40 hours a week, your money is coming in constantly, but then say if you get injured, your money is going to stop.
Gotcha.
For a self-employed person, say an accountant or someone who may have a home-based business or whatnot, it feels like you are having a expensive full-time job because now you have additional responsibilities. And again, you're relying on yourself to generate that income.
But you're probably working more. And it's it's not as efficient as the employee. Okay, so it's kind of worse, but maybe you have more potential too.
Put more earning potential. Yeah.
Okay.
Then if you look at the other side of the quadrant, you've got a business owner.
Yeah.
And a business owner, let's just say, for example, you could buy a franchise where the system's already there, it's proven, you don't have to start from scratch, and you can leverage what's already there and leverage the employee's time.
Yeah, hire people to do it for you so that you can own that business, but maybe still do whatever self-employed stuff that you're doing as well. Okay, so that's a better use. And then, of course, investments are just having money and the money works for you and you don't even have to do anything.
Exactly.
Really. So what jumped out at you from that? What did you decide you wanted to do from that quadrant?
I wanted to be both a business owner and an investor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was the next step then? You did 3 years at the conference company.
Mm-hmm.
And then where did you go next?
Afterwards, so after I felt like I had kind of outgrown my position at the conference planning company, I was looking for just something new, and I stayed within the hospitality industry, but moved on to purchasing or procurement.
Okay.
Again, I worked for a small company. There was maybe 20 of us, and I helped on several hotel projects. These would be like 5-star boutique hotels in London, the UK, and in New York City.
So this is under the employee quadrant still, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you starting to think about things on the side then?
2 things happened to me during that time in my life. When I graduated, I had that Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, now I need to learn how to invest. And because my parents had already taken me to one of the big banks to have mutual funds, I was like, okay, now that I have additional money saved up from working on my own, I'm like, okay, well, I might as well go to a big
put
bank.
It in there. Yeah.
So, of course, I book an appointment. And then you do your questionnaire, and they're like, okay, well, based on your profile, you should buy these high risk and high fee mutual funds. Except they didn't say it was high risk or high fees.
Okay.
They just said they were the mutual funds and like
these ones.
Oil and gas or something. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, I trust you. And then I just put all my money in there. And now looking back, I know that they were not diversified and they were charging me an arm and a leg and they had poor results. And so after maybe half a year or a year later, I was like, oh my God, like I'm losing thousands of dollars.
So you actually were you actually losing money, or were you just like earning less money than you could have, say, somewhere else?
So for the first couple of months, it was doing stellar results and probably beating the market. I'm like, yes, this is awesome.
Okay.
And then of course it just started like going down and down and down. I'm like getting more and more nervous. And I was like, okay, like this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
So then I was having dinner with my high school friends. They were talking about ETFs, exchange traded funds. And I was like, what is that? And I was like, started doing my own research.
Okay.
And that's when I started reading more personal finance and investing books, and I taught myself how to do it.
And the motivation was you're invested in this stuff, and you didn't quite know what it was, but you knew that it was going down, and that's not good. I mean, it can be good in some periods of time, right? But anyway, that was your motivation to look into other options. Whether it was just do you know at this time, like, was it just like a market downturn at the time, or was it actually poor investments?
Poor investments.
Yeah, okay. So it was just bad, like mutual funds that were just managed to try to get high gains and they were getting losses instead? Is that what was happening?
Yeah.
Okay, so not diversified, as you said, right? So you learned about ETFs and that if you diversified your investments, like maybe even bought several ETFs, I'm guessing, you might see it go up and down, but not to the extreme that you saw your mutual fund go down.
Yeah.
So what did you do about that?
So I definitely attribute my success and how I got started with the Money Sense guide to create a perfect portfolio.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think Dan Bortolotti had
Was it the couch potato portfolio?
Yeah, and the couch potato. So it had a step-by-step guide. This was back in 2011.
Okay.
And it literally showed me all the things that I needed to do in order to go to an online brokerage and set up my own account and buy my own ETFs.
That's great. And were you aware of the fees at this point too, or just the fact that your stocks or your mutual funds, were going down?
I didn't know the fees were high until I started reading the books and they started pointing it out to me.
Okay, so now you're putting together your own portfolio, and now fees are in your mind, basically the couch potato portfolio would recommend low fee ETFs, right? So that more of your money, more of your gains, whatever they may be, they stay in your pocket.
Yeah.
Because that was the other part that you didn't even know at the time, was that not only was it going down, but it might have even been going down because it was eroded by fees.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you found this smarter way to do things, and you put together your own. Was it a self-directed one?
Yeah, I opened up with Scotia iTrade.
Okay.
I don't have any affiliation with them.
No, but that was your bank. You said no more mutual funds from Scotia, or if that was the case, and I'll go over. Or did you switch?
It was from another bank.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Scotia iTrade, I think they had a good platform, and they probably still do, right? At the time. So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different bank platforms. There's also non-bank ones like Questrade. To me, it's about user interface, right? Because you can buy any products that you want on these, right? And I doubt there's any restrictions. It's supposed to be a open market, right? So you open an iTrade account, and were you learning about things like commissions and things that you have to pay to trade, things like that too?
Yes. Yeah, I learned that. I must have read dozens and dozens of personal finance books at that point. But it was the Money Sense, the Canadian Guide to the Perfect Portfolio. That's the one that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
You actually followed it to the letter.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working at this hotel company, but on the side, you're just eating up all this personal finance stuff and really sort of starting your investment plan and making it happen on your terms.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Not what the ads say, like RSP season, right? Just come to our bank and we'll help you. And so what was the next step in your either work or investment life?
Of course, when you're creating your own ETF portfolio, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, but I made sure that I followed each of the steps properly. And every time that I received my paycheck from my employer, I would set up the automatic transfers to my RSP and my TFSA. And I think I even had a non-registered account as well, testing the waters. And soon afterwards, I started gaining traction, and I was doing way better than what they were selling me with the mutual funds.
Okay. So you saw some actual positive growth, and you knew you were paying low fees. How do we get to the money master that you are today?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I felt like I was in, I don't know, not hibernation, but a secret money nerd, spending the past decade just reading about personal finance. And whenever I tried to talk to my friends about it, it would be really tough because no one really wants to talk about money, and it's so personal. And I would try to educate my friends about it. I even told my friend, I'm like, okay, make sure you ask the financial rep at the bank about fees. And she's like, okay, well, I asked him all the questions. He said that there's no fees. And I'm like, no, but there are fees. And she's like, and we got into this argument. And it's really disheartening when people earnestly believe that they're not being charged fees, and the banks just don't make it all that transparent, right? So,
and I guess they're telling the truth, there's no upfront fees, if that's the question. Are they just answering whatever is most convenient for them? That sucks that you would give advice, specific advice to your friends, and they would still not be able to get the right answers.
Yeah. And so it would be conversations like this, or even hearing about my coworkers living paycheck to paycheck and just struggling to even save towards their RSP or TFSA, or they still had student loans 10 years later. And I'm like, I just didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, oh my God, like I need to do something.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to educate people in a way that they would be comfortable and listen to me. It wasn't until, well, fast forward, I've left the hotel and tourism industry, and now I work for Bell Canada as a content product manager in their TV department. So I've been there for 3 years. But it wasn't until 2018, my husband, Albert, was like, okay, well, my New Year's resolution is to write a book.
Okay.
I was like, okay, cool. Good on you. I will cheer you on.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not my ambition. But at that time, like we had been Toastmaster members for several years, and we had been mastering our public speaking.
What was the motivation? Well, why would you wanted to be a speaker? Was that the goal, or just a hobby?
For me, it was just to be able to not be nervous speaking in front of an audience, especially during the university days where I had to present a class presentation, or even at work, had to present in front of senior leadership. So I wanted to feel confident and be professional and taken seriously whenever I had to present on a certain topic. But for several years, I didn't know where it was going to go. It was just kind of a hobby, and I enjoyed it. And then in 2018, in January, we found out about a book writing seminar.
Okay.
So Albert and I, we had attended. It was a full weekend, and they gave us a workbook and group exercises to do. And it was through that weekend that really opened up our eyes about what a book can do for you and your career and your business.
Absolutely.
And then it just made total sense. It just clicked, because with a book, you can go on radio shows or TV and podcasts like
you have
yours.
Something to promote. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, of course, you went right to your passion of personal finance.
Yeah, I was brainstorming in my mind, like, if I were to write a book, like, what message do I want to share with the world?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, I was like, okay, well, I just love personal finance, and I've been able to have success with it, and a lot of people are struggling. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. It's overwhelming. And I was like, okay, well, this is what I can do. I can write a book and have workshops, speak at conferences, and teach people. And it just made sense to pair my speaking and my personal finance together to do that.
That's amazing. So what year was this again? 2018?
2018.
So this is last year.
Yes.
And when did you finish the book?
It took maybe 6 months to write it. We just finished the editing stage, and now it's fully edited. The manuscript's done. Yeah. And now it's going on to editing, and then it'll go on to printing. So
okay, yeah. Okay, so when does the book come out?
So this summer should be out.
Amazing. Okay, so you're done with the content. Can you talk about some parts or just the overall theme? Like, I mean, we can guess that it's about you communicating your personal finance knowledge through, but where did you go with that? Yeah,
so my book, I made it based on 3 main pillars. So first, I talk about personal finance and how to create your own investment portfolio. The second part is talking a bit about real estate investing. And then the last part is starting your own business.
Nice.
But the way that the book is structured, in the first half of the book, I really lay out the foundations. I talk about your money mindset, developing wealthy habits, and making sure that you have the solid foundation, making sure that, if you're in debt, you get out of debt, because that's not really the main focus of mine. I want to make sure that it's to help people who've saved some money, but they might be afraid to.
They don't know what to do with it. Yeah, they need to take the first step.
Yeah, so the first half is really about the foundationals, and then the second half, I really go deep down into how you can invest and give you those different investment strategies so that you can create multiple streams of income.
Yes, and in real estate, have you had any success in real estate? Did you buy that house that you wanted to on your bucket list early on?
Well, my husband and I, we both love real estate investing, and same with my in-laws. And we currently have a condo property around the east of downtown area. Okay. So we manage that together, rent it out to tenants. And then last year, I purchased a pre-construction condo in downtown Kitchener.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what, do you know the Kitchener area well? Or
we made a trip down there before we purchased it. We scoped out the whole entire neighborhood, the downtown core, interviewed people, looked into the trends, and then we learned about the new transit system that they're going to launch, as well as there's many startup companies that are there, right? Such as Google and
it's the Silicon Valley of Ontario, I guess, if you will. Because I've heard that if you wanted to buy real estate, but you're in a market like Toronto, for example, where it's almost impossible to get started, you can buy somewhere else, as long as you do your due diligence as you did. If you understand the market, at least a little bit, and know that you're going to be able to get a tenant, or, you might be able to, that might be a better option for you and would involve less down payment. Right?
For sure, yes. I mean, for us, we were able to get a 2-bedroom condo in downtown Kitchener, whereas in Toronto, you might be able to buy a studio if you're lucky.
Yeah, it's just what a tough market to get into. And so you have some experience in real estate, and so you're talking about that kind of thing, like that's a rich dad, poor dad thing as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buy real estate and create wealth, right?
Yeah.
Use it to pay for the asset itself, right?
Yeah.
It sounds so simple and like the smartest thing. Why doesn't everyone just have a bunch of real estate? What's the tough part about real estate in your mind?
I would say, because I have more experience with the stock market and investing there, compared to real estate, I find that maybe where the hesitation comes in is that real estate does require more hands-on work, because you do have to deal with tenants and, all these different rules and regulations, and your money will essentially be tied up in a physical property that may not be as liquid as with online trading.
Okay, yeah. So you have to have that risk tolerance. You have to be okay with having something just sort of tied up in one asset for a while that may involve someone, knocking down a wall by accident and you got to fix it, or the roof, leaks, or something happens. You just have to be mentally prepared for that. Then that's probably a big roadblock, you're saying, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so. Like just being a landlord, dealing with tenants. If you need to repair something, you either have to know the right contractors, or do you hire a property management service? So there is a lot to consider before you jump right into real estate investing.
It's an interesting way to look at it. I like the quadrants from the book, but I just see it as like increasing levels of difficulty, and increasing levels of potential gain, likely, but not guaranteed, of course. So like, you buy your ETFs or your stocks and your bonds or whatever it is, go to a robo-advisor, right? Easy, give them money. Things will happen, right? You don't really have to do much, right?
Exactly.
Real estate, well, you got to buy something. Maybe you got to find the tenants and do the stuff we just talked about. Maybe fix a couple of things. You have to, it's a job in itself, kind of a side job. It's not full time, but you have to be ready. And then the business is, that's a full time job. It could also be a side hustle as well. What's your business section like in the book?
For me, it's just it's a very 101 kind of introductory, just to give people the idea of being a business owner and just some basics of what they should consider. How do they start a business, or how to find their passion? What kind of industry do they need to be in? Looking at their competition, or how are they going to market their business and gain clients, and having that team culture. So just little nuggets to give them an idea and to inspire them. Especially since the gig economy has been trending for the past few years, and you've got people who have been very successful with having an Airbnb, or being an Uber or Lyft driver, or going on to Etsy. If the people who are artsy and they like to make arts and crafts or sell jewelry, even simple things like that, using what they already have, right? Like, if they have an extra bedroom in their house, they can rent it out on Airbnb. If they have a car, they can make more money by driving people to places. So.
Yeah, I do that, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I just made $60 this morning.
Wow.
But yeah, before anyone woke up. That's the key, right? Do it before the world wakes up. People don't maybe think that those are businesses, right? They're not like, oh, well, I don't want to buy a franchise, as you mentioned earlier, right? I don't have the capital. Actually, is that in your plans to like own the business that passively makes income, like that franchise type thing?
I talk a bit about franchising as well. So just giving them the different options that they can consider. Is
that something that you do or want to do?
I explored having, so this is so funny. 7 years ago, I was thinking about starting my own business. I was like, yeah, I want to own a franchise. And I was like, okay, well, which franchise would I want to own? I'm like, well, I love soft serve ice cream. Or back then they had Menchie's.
The
I was
frozen
like,
yogurt.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Froyo.
Froyo, yeah.
It was like the biggest thing. I'm like, yeah, I want to have my own Froyo. This makes so much sense. It's all self-serve. Like people do their own things,
Yeah.
and it's just it's easy. And then I applied and I looked into it.
You
and
actually
then
went through the application.
I did,
Okay.
I did. And they're like, well, can you get like $400,000 from the
That's right.
bank? And
That's right.
you need at least $200,000 in your own capital. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of risks.
Yeah, it is. Do you think when it's mentioned as part of like the way to build wealth, do you think that there's some kind of assumption that you already have capital to use? Because it would be so hard for someone, like, for example, no one can buy a McDonald's franchise. I think it's probably really hard to do anyway because they're so saturated. But unless you already are really wealthy, right? So you're talking about things that people can do without having the capital. Like real estate is one thing you need capital to do, but you don't need as much, right? You don't need to actually to have the whole value of the house, which for a franchise you kind of do, right?
Yeah.
And you already have to prove that you're viable for them to take a chance on you.
Yeah.
Is this something that you would still want to do, though?
I don't want to turn down opportunities if it were to ever come up.
Sure.
I don't want to say never. At this point in time, probably not, though. I mean, if we were to have our own business, we may look into Airbnb.
Would that be instead of having tenants, like in your rental properties? Or like in something that you currently live in, that kind of thing?
We were kind of brainstorming different ideas. We've just been listening to a couple podcasts like on Airbnb. So
Yeah.
I don't know. There's certain rules and regulations. It's always changing nowadays.
There are. You
So,
can make way more money than a monthly tenant if you Airbnb out every day,
Yeah.
but not everybody is okay with that regulation-wise. As you said, maybe there's a municipal bylaw or something that says you can't do this or you can only do it on occasion.
Yeah.
It can't be the sole purpose of this property, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because, I don't know, I guess there's something about people want their neighbors, they want to trust their neighbors. And, a monthly tenant, even though they could leave with 60 days notice, is still more regular than somebody who's there for 24 hours. So I can see, these are the challenges of businesses, right? You want to be able to hire somebody to run something, but you need money to do that. Would you recommend that people just make sure they know what their goals are? Like if you really wanted to that Menchie's franchise, you could have probably just dedicated all of your stuff to that. Maybe you could have got a loan for that right amount, but then you would have had to have that $200,000 in the bank. So it just takes a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe there's stuff you can do on the way to build capital.
Yeah, not only the capital was a bit prohibited during that time, but also I probably would have had to quit my full-time job in order to run a franchise.
That's it.
I wasn't willing to do. So I think that for people, I think it's probably easier for people to carry a full-time job and have something part-time on the side.
Okay.
Just probably more manageable. But for people who are in a position where they may have had a previous business and they've saved up some capital and then they want to look into franchise, I mean, by all means, there are ones that are out there that can generate you the income that you want and to have the lifestyle that you want. So
Yeah, and you're doing it the smart way. You got your full-time job still.
Yes.
Doing it on the side. Do you find that you wish you had more time to work on the personal finance stuff?
Oh, sometimes I wish that there was a clone of me so I could do double the work.
Exactly. It's tough though, right? And I guess that's why we should start when we're a little bit younger and when you don't have, if you have kids, I mean, that's a side hustle in itself. It's actually, that's the full-time job and everything else is a side hustle. But you get started early. Would you say, like, if you have an idea? I know that Albert wrote a book. I saw it on his LinkedIn. So you guys both have your books, right? Either published or about to be published. Do you think people are holding back?
I would say so. I think a lot of people let fear stop them from what they can achieve and what their true potential is. Yeah, for us to be able to work with our book publisher, it's not cheap to publish a book. And so for us, it was an investment, but we're thinking about the long term and where we see our careers going and just to be able to have the opportunity to speak on stage in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people and make that impact and make that difference in the world, whether it's through teaching people about personal finance, and for Albert, it's about improving the healthcare system. So we just focus on the end goal and just jump right in, because I feel that with successful people, they make the decision first and then they figure it out later.
That's right.
And the path will be shown to them. Whereas the people who just sit on the sidelines and they just analyze and overthink things, they end up not making a decision.
Yeah, if you're just sitting at home waiting for all of the perfect things to align, it just doesn't happen that way, right? Nothing ever happens in that way. And so writing a book, and you just got to get out. If you see a book seminar, right, and hey, maybe I should try this. Be open to different ideas, right? And think about what you're passionate about, and if you can make a difference in the world in doing that. And you mentioned, did you say some of the proceeds are going to go to mental health support? Yes,
that's right. So with my book, The Money Master, I am so honored and proud to be partnering with CAMH, the Center of Addiction and Mental Health.
Amazing.
And what I'm going to do is that for every book purchase, I will personally donate $2 towards this charity to help with mental health research and those families who have been impacted.
Amazing. And that means a lot to me, because I spent a lot of time at CAMH going through gambling addiction recovery, gambling counseling, and that's where I figured out I had attention deficit disorder. So I owe basically my current successful, happy life to spending a lot of time at CAMH trying to figure it all out. So that means a lot. Why would you align with CAMH? I mean, you mentioned your mother's mental health issues earlier.
Yeah, growing up, I lived in a somewhat dysfunctional household. Okay. We were a very caring and loving family.
Yeah.
But I remember watching a cartoon show one day, and the morning cartoons, and it said something about like schizophrenia. And then my sister was like, "Did you know your mother has schizophrenia?" And I was in grade 3 at the time, so I must have been 8 years old. I'm like, I had no idea what my sister was trying to tell me, but she was trying to explain in the way that, your mom has some mental health issues. This is why she's not able to have a full-time job, and she's a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. And as I grew older and older, I started to see the signs and the behaviors of my mom going through depression and even being bipolar and having to see the doctor, or all of a sudden she would be hospitalized. Wow. And, I'd have to go visit her. And so she would exhibit all these strange behaviors, but then I had to take a step back and understand that it's the mental health aspect that's controlling her thoughts and emotions and the things that she's saying. So it was tough and challenging, of course, for a family, especially because in our society, unfortunately, like when you look at someone who may be diagnosed with cancer, you can see the visible signs on their body.
That's right. But
with mental health, it may not be as apparent. And within our Chinese community, it was very taboo to ever talk about it. And so it was just this hidden secret. And we even lost touch with our relatives. Wow. I didn't know who they were for decades. Like, honestly, I haven't really met some of my relatives until several years ago. They're all like unknown to me. So it just put a strain on our family and then our relatives. So I feel that it's important that we open up about mental health and have these conversations, because when I did a fundraiser for CAMH a couple of years ago with a couple of my friends, I opened up about my story, and I had friends emailing me and thanking me for sharing my story. And
Absolutely.
Friends who I have been close with for years or decades, I didn't know that they were going through their own personal experiences. Even when my mother passed away in my early 20s, it was really hard for me, and I had to go seek counseling, a social worker, which I also highly recommend for people who are grieving and going through those stages. It's important to talk about it and to process those feelings, and extend an open arm and to create those conversations, because you never know when someone who really needs your support.
Well, that's amazing. And I hope that while you're going out to talk about the book, that you have the opportunity to talk about this as part of your public speaking engagements.
I'm definitely making it a mission to bring more awareness about it as I continue with future upcoming events, and just to be able to make people feel comfortable talking about both money and mental health, since they have such a great impact on our daily lives.
Absolutely. You and I align on that very much, because what I would love to do is talk about personal finance and addiction and mental health issues like attention deficit that I have. I can talk about what I've been through. You can talk about what you've been through. It's hard for us to know what others have been through, but we can talk about our stories, right? And bring awareness. And that's key. We should definitely, let's do something for Bell Let's Talk Day.
Yes.
Let's talk about collaborating on that, because I think we need to combine mental wellness awareness along with financial wellness and then physical wellness. It all goes together, right? And you can't separate one from the other. You try, and if you don't have financial wellness, usually the food wellness goes out the window as well, because you can't afford, or you're not really focusing on buying the best stuff for you. It's just like if you're not taking care of one part of you, the other parts suffer.
Just
right?
like a ripple effect.
It really is a ripple effect. That's a great way to put it. So the book, it's coming out, and how will people be able to buy it? Or do you have a website?
Yeah, so with my book, it will be released this summer, and they can go to my website, which is sandyyong.com, which is spelled SANDYYONG.com.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I just had Sandy Martin on the show with an I, so it's good. I didn't want to put you guys back to back, so someone will be in the middle, but okay. 2 Sandys within 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, SANDYYONG.
Yes.
Right? Perfect. .com.
And you can sign up for the newsletter. And once the book is published, it will be available online on Amazon. And I'll also have physical printed copies whenever I go for speaking engagements. And again, $2 will be donated to CAM8.
Perfect. And so that's the best place to find out about you. We'll just leave it at that. So thanks for coming on the show. Yeah, it's good to talk about having a passion and pursuing that passion, and also having a really good cause like mental health. And just really, I liked what you're doing for financial wellness awareness, to see everybody's basically suffering. Like you said, you have this secret. It seems like a secret, right? You know, spend less than you make, invest in balanced things. It's not, on the surface, it's not difficult, but it is, because everybody's bombarded with so much information, but also misinformation. And so it's good to have as many clarifying things as we can. So yeah, thanks for writing the book. Thanks for coming on the show.
Great. Thank you so much, Bo, for having me.
And that was episode 84 with Sandy Yong. If you like the podcast and want to see me get to episode 100 and beyond, please support the podcast by going to my Patreon site and becoming a patron. It's only a few bucks a week, but if enough people do it, it starts to add up. Head over to patreon.com/Bo Humphreys if you're interested. That's PATREON. Now, this is a part of the show where I talk about some of the things I do other than this weekly podcast. I am a personal finance coach. So if you're looking for someone to help you get organized and simplify your financial life, head over to BoHumphreys.com, click on the banner, and book a free 15-minute personal finance consultation with me. We'll chat about your situation, and you can decide if booking an hourly coaching session is something that'll help you get moving in the right direction. What I find is that a lot of people are right on the edge of doing something to improve their finances, and the ironic solution to making progress financially is to spend some money on a monthly coaching session. I am a co-host and the technical producer of a new podcast called Dear Ruby with my friend and personal finance expert, Rubina Ahmed Haq. Head over to dearruby.com, that's DEARRUBI.com, to check out the first 3 episodes and let us know what you think by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. We're always looking for interesting personal finance stories and issues to be discussed. So if you want to be featured, please record some audio and click on the big red upload button on the website. I have a personal finance webinar coming up next week on Wednesday, June 5th, 2019 at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Michelle Hung, the sassy investor from episode 70 of the podcast, will be joining me for a webinar we're calling Lunchtime with Bo and Michelle. If you've ever wanted to ask me or Michelle a question about pretty much anything, this is your opportunity. To register for the webinar, click the link in the show notes or head over to bohumphreys.com/webinar. That's it for this episode. I'll be back next week with Shanna Bell, author of the new book, The Art of Being a PETA.